Yasin drew his own pistol and fired as well. There was no mercy in him when it came to his enemies. One after another, Yasin's warriors clipped D-rings to the cable and slid across the intervening distance. Once aboard the cargo ship, the warriors moved across the upper deck and quickly executed all crewmen they found. Their orders allowed no survivors. Bright muzzle flashes flickered to life, then died. Clipping his own D-ring to the cable, Yasin followed his men onto the besieged ship. Just putting his feet on the wooden deck empowered him. Several warriors produced flashlights and stood waiting at the top of the stairs. They went down into the hold at Yasin's command. Yasin followed. The hold stank of fish. A few inches of water sloshed across the floor. Yasin led the way further back into the hold. He stopped beside an 8-foot-tall bin packed with ice and fish. "Here." The arrangement had been simple. Yasin had paid his money, and his merchandise was to have been hidden within the ship's load. The crew had no idea what was hidden beneath their feet as they went about their duties on deck. Only the ship's captain was aware of the deadly cargo. 2 of Yasin's men were searching the ship for the captain now. In moments, Yasin would finally take possession of his prize, 2 nuclear missiles. At Yasin's order, 2 of the warriors laid down their rifles and took shovels from the tool cabinet on the hull. They clambered into the bin and started shoveling ice and fish into the water sloshing across the lower deck. It took several minutes for Yasin to realize that nothing was buried in the reeking mixture. A scramble of feet came down the stairs. Another 2 warriors brought a fat man down the stairs and dumped him unceremoniously onto the floor. "Where is the captain?" "I am the captain." "Where is my cargo?" Yasin asked. The captain shook his head. "What cargo?" He remained huddled on his knees. Moving as quickly as a striking snake, a warrior backhanded the captain across the face with a pistol, knocking his head back sharply. "The missiles," Yasin said calmly. "Where are my missiles?" Sweat rolled down the man's face. "I have no missiles. Gronsky gave me nothing." He was weeping now. "He said the deal was off. He said you knew." A black rage possessed Yasin. He hated dealing with Colonel Vladimir Gronsky of the Russian army. The man was greedy and unscrupulous, but he routinely worked in the black market circles, and Yasin had needed him to arrange his munitions purchase. Unable to control the rage that filled him, Yasin picked up one of the shovels and beat the man to the ground. He didn't stop hitting the captain until he had no energy left. All the years, all the money he'd spent, and he'd been betrayed by another man's greed. Shuddering, Yasin threw the shovel aside and glared down at the captain's bloody, lifeless body. Then he took a deep breath. Gronsky was greedy. The missiles still existed, were still within his grasp, as was his vengeance for his family and friends whom the United States had killed and would kill for generations to come. He could still make his plan work. He turned and walked from the cargo hold. On deck, Yasin gave orders to place demolition charges. Minutes later, the men returned to the Observer the same way they had come. The moment the ship had moved a safe distance away, the munitions blew and the cargo ship broke to pieces. Yasin watched the ship and crew settle into their watery grave. Gronsky would be made to pay for his betrayal. He would pay most dearly. Wilmington, North Carolina. The present. 20:53 hours. Will Coburn stopped in front of the dead woman lying crumpled on the threadbare carpet. He stared down at her. Violent death still gave him pause even after years of seeing it. He held his flashlight steady and examined the woman's body. She was in her mid-20s. She'd kept her black hair short and neat, but blood matted it now. More blood streaked her face and made her look of pained surprise even more stark. She wore blue jeans and a dove-gray blouse under a nondescript green windbreaker. Someone had cut the woman's throat. Crimson streaked the front of her blouse and windbreaker. Only a few blood streaks stained the carpet she lay on. Violence and death no longer shocked Will. Since his transfer to NCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Services, 3 years ago, he had seen every kind of inhumanity one person could show another, but he never got used to seeing it. It was enough, at times, for him to question God, though he knew that God allowed men free will. When men abused their freedom, it was their own fault, not God's. Still, the peace Will had with the Lord was an uneasy thing, made even more uneasy by what was occurring in his own family life these past months. Will glanced around the apartment, trailing the flashlight beam with his sea-green eyes. "Is she one of yours?" The voice was loud and challenging. Will turned to face the man who had accompanied him into the grim room. Wilmington Police Detective Leonard Carpenter stood nearby. "She's one of ours," Will answered. He ran a hand through his thick shock of black hair, cut within military regulations. Carpenter flipped through the notes. "Says here that she's Chief Petty Officer Helen Swafford. She was NCIS?" Will nodded. Carpenter put his notepad away. "Know what she was doing out here?" "No." "If she was working on something, seems like she would have had a partner." "The rest of the team is accounted for." Will had checked that through Swafford's supervisor. "Then she was out here on her own hook." "Looks that way," Will agreed. "Wilmington's not that far from Camp Lejeune," the homicide detective said, "but she came a fair piece to get herself killed." "I'm sure getting killed wasn't on her agenda, detective," a feminine voice stated. Will glanced up as Maggie Foley entered the apartment. At 5 feet 4 inches tall and slender, Maggie didn't look like much of a threat. Her dark brown hair was cropped at the shoulder, and she looked younger than her 27 years. But she had an obsession with the gym and no-holds-barred volleyball that made her tough as nails on a martial art mat. Maggie looked as if she'd been at a dinner party when the call had come in. She wore black slacks with razor-edge creases and a charcoal bias-striped shirt. French cuffs added to an understated, elegant flair. Her diamond earrings glittered as they caught the light. To Will, Maggie's appearance seemed in stark contrast to her surroundings in this room of death. But then, even in fatigues, Maggie Foley never looked middle class. The NCIS drafted most of its agents from the civilian sector, including a number of ex-policemen and security guards. Will's unit was different. Because his team handled potentially lethal special assignments, most of his team members had been handpicked from the military. Maggie was the sole civilian. None of the personnel the military had to draw from had the expertise she brought to the team. She'd spent 8 weeks in boot camp prior to the assignment to the unit, then another month working with special ops personnel to bring her up to speed. There were things she was still learning about military ops, but she learned them quickly. According to the super, this apartment had been vacant for 2 months. Maggie shined her beam on piles of empty beer cans and cigarette butts in 3 corners of the room, and the 2 stained sleeping bags in the center. "Somebody comes calling while the 3 bears are out." "Neighborhood kids," Carpenter replied. "They come up here and party when no one's looking." "Did one of them make the call to the PD?" Maggie asked. "Don't know. Caller didn't identify himself." "According to the phone records of the payphone outside," Maggie said, "a call was placed to the Wilmington Police Department about an hour and a half ago. That was at 7:17 p.m. Took you a while to call us, didn't it?" "I wanted to verify the murdered woman's identity before I bothered you," Carpenter said. "How did you make the identification?" Maggie persisted. "Her ID was on the floor." "Did you disturb the body?" Anger stained Carpenter's broad face. "I got better things to do than stand here and answer stupid questions." He started to walk away. "Detective Carpenter." Will's voice carried command. After 12 years spent aboard ships, 6 of them commanding one, the aircraft carrier USS John F. Kennedy, his voice was a tool, as solid and heavy as a ball-peen hammer.